Hello and welcome to part 6 of this 6.3 kilometre Westminster Sightseeing Photorun, and in this final section we go from Lambeth Bridge along Albert Embankment and end up at Big Ben.
On this last leg we go across to bridges, we have river views and we go past the hospital. Now I'm just going to go quickly over the history because we've seen some of this before, but this particular route is going along what is now the Albert Embankment, but as you can see there's not very much in terms of other houses or industry apart from Lambeth Palace along the route, as we see from this map from 1560 Elizabethan times. But if we move on a little bit further into history, and we can see the development of the area over time from 1775 up until 1827, you can see there's not a great deal of movement in terms of industry. There's starting to be some build-up. And then we look at the last map down in here in 1869, and we can see that the Albert Embankment has been built and the place for where the hospital is going to be sited is positioned. So if we move just a little bit further on from here, we can see how the area would have looked in 1845. This is going to be before they built the Albert Embankment. You can see some of the industry down there towards the bottom level. We can see the prominent position of Lambeth Palace, and then we can see the Westminster Bridge, or the old style of Westminster Bridge, bring us back to point F, which is where Big Ben was currently being built at the time. You can also see out towards the left hand side that in B we've got Millbank Prison. So this is where the Tate Britain is today, but it was a prison in a penitentiary style, which was also used to transport prisoners off to Australia. And you'll also see that Lambeth Bridge hadn't been built. This is where Horse Ferry Road is today, and there used to be a horse ferry which used to bring you across the bridge, but we'll get to that in a little while. And so that sort of completes the history for now, and we'll go through and show you what the run looks like as if you were running it at speed. So let's go and see the run. If you remember, we ended up at Lambeth Bridge looking at Thames House. This is where we start the run. So as we come out of the stairs, we cross the road and then we just go along Lambeth Bridge. You'll see that it is painted red. This is to represent the colours of the House of Lords. Westminster Bridge is in green, and you get some great views across both sides of the river with the views of the Houses of Parliament. And when we get to the end, we just turn left down the stairs and we will have Lambeth Palace on our right hand side and a pier on our left. And then we just go to the side of the palace so you get a bit more of a view of it. And just as we get to the end by the SOE Memorial, we turn left and then we go along the side of St Thomas's Hospital. This is the extent of it, or the old St Thomas's Hospital, with good views of the House of Commons in front of us. Now you'll see that what this used to look like when we get to the map. So we'll just pop up a map here. This is how the hospital used to look, and in fact if you look at some of the pictures you'll see quite similar to some of these older style areas. The top end area got bombed in the Second World War and was replaced by a modern building, as we see coming up on the right. But as we get towards the end and we can see Westminster Bridge in front, you see a set of stairs. We go up those, we see the London Eye in front of us and the Old County Hall, and it's just in this last leg we just go across the bridge with the Palace of Westminster in front of us, and then we just get to the finish, which is just by the Portcullis House. So before we go and show you the sights along the way, and this is an example of some of them, we'll just give you a quick navigation of the route on 360. Again, this is going to be pretty quick because it's a relatively straightforward. So this is the view as we would start the run, so with Westminster Bridge in front and Thames House to the right, and we just basically go straight to the end of the bridge, and then this is the stairways down to Albert Embankment, and then we've got the Lambeth Palace in front. That's the SOE Memorial to this special operations in the Second World War, Churchill's special troops. And then we just go right to the very end. So it's just gone straight to the very end of it. And then this is what we see when we get to the stairs. So that's where we've just come from, seeing the whole of the river and the Houses of Parliament. And then we just go along the stretch of Westminster Bridge, taking one more view of the sights from the bridge. Don't often see it this empty, but that's what you can get if you go early in the morning. And then we just finish just outside Westminster Station, which is where we started from. Okay, so to sort of finish off, we have a picture here of Lambeth Bridge and a picture in the bottom corner of what it would have looked like when it was built in 1862. You can see it was a type of suspension bridge. This bridge dates from 1932, and this was the crossing that replaced the horse ferry crossing that existed for many years. And this is an example of what it might have looked like in the 1800s. So there would have been a ferry going across, but there were horses which would have moved up and down and basically pulled the boats from one side to the other. As you can see, it was a bit further down. You've got Lambeth Palace in this particular corner. It would have been a bit further down from where the bridge is today. But up until 1750, when Westminster Bridge, this was the only other sort of major crossing point between here and London Bridge. Okay, so the next thing we'll look at is Thames House in front of us. If you have a look at it, you'll see there's two buildings quite similar. So we've got Thames House on the left-hand side, and then we have Imperial Chemical House on the other side. They were used by ICI Chemical Company when they were built in the 1930s, but then they were eventually taken over, or Thames House was taken over by MI5 Security Services. So this would have been the Spooks headquarters for those who watched the television programme. A bit further on we have Lambeth Palace. As we've said before, this is the London residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury. It's pretty old, so it's been there for about 800 years, from about 1200, and it was originally formed. But the gateway we see in front of us dates back to Tudor times, and the Morton Tower is what it's called. If we look at other pictures of Lambeth Palace, it also has a Great Hall, which was restored in 1663. And at the end of Lambeth Palace, the gardens, there is the library, the Church of England library, which is quite near St Thomas's Hospital, quite a modern looking building. There is a church we can see just on the left hand side, and that is St Mary's at Lambeth. And the tower actually dates back, or some parts of it date back to 1377. However, a bit ironically, this church has been converted into a garden museum since 1972. As we go down Albert Embankment, it's quite difficult to see the hospital, but if you were to view it from the other side of the river, this is what the hospital will look like. And you can see that it still retains some of the original buildings towards the right-hand side of it as we look at it. The area towards Westminster Bridge was bombed in the Second World War, so they have a relatively shiny new building, which dates back to 1975. Now, St Thomas's Hospital, although it's been in this position since 1871, and it's got real connections to Florence Nightingale, and in fact there's a Florence Nightingale museum here, the hospital itself actually dates back to 1215, originally out near Guy's Hospital towards the City of London, and it was named after St Thomas Becket, who was Archbishop of Canterbury from 1162 until he was murdered in 1170. And he had a bit of a conflict with the king at the time, King Henry II, over the privileges of the church, and was murdered and then later canonised. So St Thomas's Hospital has 7 buildings, one for each day of the week, and it was built in a pavilion style so that it improved ventilation and monitoring and segregation of infectious diseases. The next picture we look at is what it looked like when it was originally built, but as you can see it's changed a little bit since then. Do get quite an interesting view from the garden outside the new part of St Thomas's Hospital of the revolving torsion fountain, which was built in 1972. And then as we go across Westminster Bridge, we see the Houses of Parliament in front of us. And as you can see from the insert, it hasn't changed a great deal since this photo was taken over 100 years ago. The other thing to mention as we go onto Westminster Bridge is Old County Hall, which now houses the London Aquarium, the Shrek Adventure and the London Dungeons. This was the former headquarters of the London County Council and later the Greater London Council. It was built in 1922 in the Edwardian Baroque style by the architect Ralph Knott, and it stayed in that position until 1986 when the GLC was abolished by Margaret Thatcher. It later reformed as the London Assembly with the Mayor of London and into a new building at City Hall, which is just opposite the Tower of London. And as I said earlier, the building was transformed to cater for those attractions as well as the Marriott Hotel. So as we close and we get to the end, we've got Westminster Bridge, which we've talked about before many times. This is basically the start and the end point of the run, and it's a good place to finish. So I hope you did enjoy that. I think we have to sort of finish off with a view of Big Ben, and I'd like to finish off by showing you what the bell used to sound like when it was ringing every hour on the hour. And this was the last time the bell was rung before the renovations and all the scaffolding went up. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this 6.3 kilometre walk. You've seen the difference between the north side and the south side of the river, or the west and east really in terms of its orientation in this part of London. And I hope you appreciate that the House of Parliament is really the centre of London, or lots of things that went on throughout its history. So I'll close with the ring of the bells.